Architecture and head of the architecture section, Eric Herman, assistant professor in the architecture section, and here at the WEX, our amazing staff in communications, marketing and design, development, education, and patron services, house management, and tech services. We just have an amazing group assembled to make these things happen. Most of you probably have heard of Jeanne Gang, but for those of you who haven't, here's a little bio. This year, Jeanne was named one of 2019's most influential people in the world by Time magazine and was the only architect honored. Award-winning actress and playwright Anna Deavere Smith, who nominated Jeanne, said it best. Jeanne's stunning Aqua Tower in Chicago is the tallest building ever built by a woman. Now she's building an even taller one. Yet for Jeanne, architecture is not just a wondrous object, it's a catalyst for change. A MacArthur Fellow and member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Gang has also received numerous accolades that include the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in 2013 and Architectural Review's Architect of the Year in 2016. Among her current projects are the next United States Embassy in Brasilia, Brazil, a unified campus for the California College of Arts in San Francisco, and the $2.2 billion global terminal and global concourse at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Beyond this built work, Gang and her studio also develop research, publications, exhibitions, and events that push design's ability to create public awareness and lead to change, a practice that Gang calls actionable idealism. These actions are as diverse as improving ecological biodiversity in cities to reimagining the physical relationship of police stations and the communities they serve. She truly is an architect for the next era. At the same time, Gang has challenged the status quo in professional practice by closing the gender wage gap in her company and encouraging her colleagues to follow suit and achieve pay equity. I was inspired to find out recently that Studio Gang funds a graduate teaching assistant position at the Knowlton School. Second-year student Susie Demerit had the chance to meet Jeanne today and show her around campus, which is terrific. So you can read more about Jeanne's bio projects and research in the program notes. I hope you'll also come up with questions, and especially the students here tonight, to ask during the Q&A directly following the talk. I'm going to warn you that though I've never met Jeanne, we are wearing the same outfit. It was not planned. So just to get that out there before it happens. It's not a David Lynch film. Please join me in welcoming Jeanne to the stage.
Thank you so much. You look much better in it than me. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I want to dedicate this talk to two of my most favorite Ohio State alums. One of them is my partner, Mark Schendel, but the other one is a dear friend who recently passed away, David Biaggi, who some of you might remember. Amazing architects, both of them, and David will be truly missed. Tonight, I thought about talking with you about some technological developments that are going on right now. And one of the ones that's been most disconcerting to me is this kind of idea of launching to another planet to start a colony on Mars. You might have heard of the BFR, the big rocket with the F in between, by Elon Musk, which is a fantastic, fantastic technological achievement. But it worries me to think that this is the solution to our planet, our climate situation. One of my favorite professors and philosophers is the professor Bruno Latour, who recently gave a talk about, he kind of came up with this idea of a fictional planetarium where the different planets in the fictional planetarium have different names and different descriptions, including things like planet globalization, planet modernity, two dark planets, which one of them is planet exit, which I think this belongs to, and another one was planet security. Anyway, there's 7 different planets and they're all working on each other. But one of the planets is named planet Terrestrial, and it's a place where the inhabitants form a new kind of relationship with all living things on Earth. It's similar to planet Anthropocene, but slightly different. And so I thought that this work we could talk about is a commitment to the terrestrial here in our projects, in our work. And you will see, I think all architects, because we work on this very thin layer of material that is on the surface of the planet, we all deal with terrestrial things. And part of our work has been to understand and to not give up on, let's say, the terrestrial just yet. This is an image of our office in Chicago, where we've started a project on the rooftop, which is, it's a landscape, but it's not designed. It's a landscape that has many different regional plants that we are testing out as habitat on the roof. We've been doing green roofs for a long time, but this one is different because it's really the start of what I think could be a series of kind of sky gardens on rooftops that bring this layer of earth up to the roof and try to see how much biodiversity we can get on that roof. So this is just our own, it's a self-initiated project by my office and myself, and every year we test how many different species of animals and plants that we have. This is like zooming up from the office, and you can see where our office is in relation to the city. And I think it's interesting that, in a way, this is where I started the practice in Chicago, and there's still all the things in this view are the same things that interest me, only now, like maybe in different places. There are tall buildings there. There's human habitat. There's a river in this view, if you can see it, a river that was dominated by industry. There's a lake beyond those buildings. There's a natural habitat, and there are people in this place. So we're using this as a starting point to initiate other green roofs next door in our local area to build up the habitat there. We're also doing things like honey and bees on one side. This is an image of how you go about counting these species. So this one day a year we do a bio blitz, and you just kind of collect as much as you can, seeds and insects. It's incredible how much variety there is there. I was shocked. And then we're checking to see if it's increasing or decreasing, and what's happening and what's working. We share this information, and the main point of this activity is not only just doing it, but also creating community within our office and with our neighbors. And it's really what inspires me most, is to see how architecture can create relationships between people, but also to our environment. So now we are locating our office in different places. So we have little seeds that have gone off into San Francisco and New York, and now in Paris. So each one of those offices has its own projects that it is doing in addition to our clients' projects that are kind of ongoing research and experimentation. We also produce our work and try to share it in ways with the community, such as this book called Reverse Effect that we did a few years ago that was really looking at the history of the Chicago River and imagining ways that we could renew this river. So it really wasn't about architecture. It had some student work in there, but it was really about the history of the manipulation of the Chicago River. And this is a river that maybe like the Ohio River, it was heavily industrialized and very polluted, but also very managed. And this is, it was at some point so kind of disgusting that people really steered clear of this river altogether to avoid coming in contact with it. And then today's problems are really more about flooding because of massive rainstorms, rain bombs, invasive species coming up, the Mississippi River threatening to come in, and poor water quality. But then there's this also great potential of the former industrial fabric along that river and what can be done with it. So in this book, we outlined what should the city do, what could you do in these steps to unreverse the Chicago River. And one of the first steps we recommended was to let people have access to it, simply, even if it's in bad quality. Just let people access the river. And that was taken up by the mayor of Chicago, the new mayor at the time, and he launched a program to do a number of projects along the Chicago River, and different architects doing boat houses, parks, and even river walks along the river downtown. We ended up doing 2 boat houses, so it was kind of like a research project turned into a real project where we could design a building that people could get this access, this gateway into the riverfront. This boathouse is at Clark Park. It's on the north side. We also did one on the south side, and I'm kind of showing them both together. But it's incredible now how often this river is used. It's totally changed the way people interact with this waterway. And they feel ownership of it. So this is a boathouse for youth and many different groups that have been rowing on the river, but without the facility. And so the architecture comes in with, how do you get people excited and attentive to this new opportunity of going to the river? So we were picking up on the idea of this stop motion oars that we transformed into a roof form to bring light and actually warmth into the boat storage building. Here you can see it under construction. And with a very low budget, everything in this building is straight pieces, but the way that we put them together, like the oar motion, you end up with these very beautiful warped surfaces at the roof, almost like the hull of a boat. And it really has become, I get so excited when I see them having a regatta on the river where you really see people taking over the river, the waterway, and making it their own. It's really visible how the improvement is happening. Architecture, I've always been inspired by this kind of like motion. How do you capture motion? This is an image from Etienne Jules Marais, who was a French scientist, artist, who tried to use the stop motion, just like Muybridge did, to study movement. In our boat house, we really use that kind of rhythmic movement to energize the building and bring people to it. And you can see through the elevation and the facades here, and the actual spatial quality of the space inside, this sense of movement that brings it together, makes it exciting, and makes people want to go there. They have programs for veterans. They have after-school programs, different groups that row and find strength through this teamwork and building self-confidence. Another thing is that you never can predict everything that happens in a flexible building, and it needs to house many things. They do yoga there and after-school classes. It's really a community center on the water. I think architects are, in some ways that last project show we have to be somehow like advocates of things. And I think I feel comfortable in that role, maybe because my mom was a community organizer, but we were always doing something. But we also have to be kind of these interpreters, because we are people who can understand scientific things, but we also communicate with many different publics. This is the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and we won a competition to add on to this building with a new wing. And the thing that I learned about them is that they really participate in and give education to many different age levels. So from little kids that are, going to the museum for the first time, to their parents, to teachers. They even give people PhDs, they grant PhDs at this museum. And there is this kind of crisis in science right now. So how to increase people's curiosity and a sense of discovery about natural sciences. So the building, the campus is about 25 different buildings. It was originally supposed to be a kind of a cross square with 4 courtyards, but they've slowly filled in all these courtyards, and now a lot of people get lost in here, so it's very hard to get a sense of science. And so what we did was, and maybe why we won the competition, was really just to take apart, the taxonomy of this building, let's say, and find a way to make a clear path for visitors and make connections. Over 30 new connections to the existing building will be made through this, eliminating a lot of the dead ends. So it was really, it was kind of a functional idea. And you can see this is the new wing here, and the path that we found really that was there all along that can connect people throughout the entire museum. So this flow and movement were very crucial to the idea, and we started looking at geological forms, how they inspire you to discover things, how could they be harnessed in a building like this, and also architectural spaces that also carry that same quality, like in a cathedral, or on the left is the Burton Goldberg project, Marina City, this kind of sense of space and discovery. And so you can see in the section this central space, the central exhibition hall, and how it connects also with the neighboring buildings to align with the floors that are there, et cetera. One of the exciting things they do at the museum is they use tools to constantly study their own collection, and there's always new discoveries when they take something into the MRI machine. And we discovered that that's where all the different branches of science were suddenly intersecting at this machine. So we're using that lab to be a place for collaboration between the different sciences. And this is a drawing that shows kind of looking through the walls of the central exhibition hall to this massive collection that will then be displayed, so you can see the quantity of this material, which is really the source of their science in the museum. To make a space like that, of course we have like very nice high-tech tools for modeling, but we at Studio Gang, we always like making things, and being in a cold climate like Chicago or Columbus, you can just take a block of ice and start melting it out. And so this concept of flow even permeated into the tools that we use to make things. And so after we melted this out using hot water, a hair dryer, a blowtorch, we then scanned our ice models and used those for informing our actual digital models. And so you can see here what flow looks like in a form of ice. And here's the final interior shot of what it will be like. This is under construction right now, and really exciting because all of these walls that are very fluid are also structural in this project. So we're using an innovative way of casting this interior by using shotcrete on rebar cages that are preformed and prefabricated and brought to the site. So all of these walls, it's structural walls, structural arches and vaults that are forming the space in an entirely new, different geometry than we have seen in architecture. And these are the stairs that take you up from the universally accessible new entry along Columbus Avenue. And here you can see some of the space looking into, on the right-hand side, the insectarium, which will, for the first time, show their entire collection of insects. And so this building should open in 2021. And we're really excited about how it will help people discover science. Since I'm in New York, I wanted to show you a project we called Solar Carve Tower, and it is also known as 40 10th Ave. Very exciting title. And it's done in this context of the New York zoning ordinance, which really dictates in New York a kind of a step-back skyscraper, which is very beautiful and interesting in New York. We found out, though, that those step-backs really didn't apply to our site. We had a very strange site here in New York. It's along the High Line, and so for the first time you have a kind of an interior park, not an outside street, but the public space running through the middle of the block. So the shape of this building is really dictated by having respect for that public space outside our building. And so in this case, I'd say, as an architect, we were really more of someone who was editing and critiquing some existing rules. And here, instead of building the as-of-right building, which would have ended up like on the lower left there, kind of killing all the plants along the High Line, we argued to set back from that High Line public park and use these solar angles to shave the building off to provide views and light into the High Line. And you can see some of the study models there with different degrees of cutting back, really going for the most floor area we could get for our owner, but at the same time deferring to this public space. And then you could see here the concept of the building, preserving the plants that were already, growing very well along the High Line, but also making a space that could be beautiful for the owners of the building as well. So we did that through studying how much sunlight would go to the gardens, and we were able to bring something like 360 more hours of sunshine to the garden per year by this cuts. And you can get this was done a little bit earlier before it was finished, but you get a sense of how far it stepped back from the High Line, where I think a lot of people were initially just trying to get as close to it as possible. In the cuts, we use this faceted glass, which is articulating the special parts that are shaved off or carved. And it also has a very nice quality on the inside where people can have conference rooms or larger offices or open offices. This is going to be an office building, but it's really just a spec office building, I guess you could say. But it turned out to be this kind of gem of a building. Another thing that was very important here was to be attentive to the position of this building along the West Side Highway that you could see there and along the river. So to reduce the glare that would be in drivers' eyes, we used a very low reflectivity on the glass, as well as reducing the potential for bird strikes. Because it is on the river, it's very important to think about migrating birds, and which is a big hazard. Glass is a big hazard for birds. So we used the latest thinking on that to create this building's exterior. Most of the panels were created, you can kind of see one in the upper left-hand side of the picture, all of those could fit onto a truck, and they were nested together and then assembled on site with relative ease. This is also gives you a sense. I always like photographing stuff during construction because you get to really understand how it's put together. So that's finished now. And so we're talking about the terrestrial, but what about tall buildings? They tend to rise up above the ground. One of the reasons I'm interested in them really started with the Aqua Tower, just having that opportunity to do it and realizing how beneficial it is to reduce the footprint of our habitation. So on the right-hand side of this image, you can see an equivalent number of households to the left-hand side, one tall building. And that actually pencils out to the amount of carbon that you produce, if you live in one kind of arrangement versus another, living in a city where you can walk. And it really turns out to be about, 12 more tons of carbon per year per household living in the more suburban style layout. And so that caught, I was using research that was from the Chicago Neighborhood Technology Institute, and basically we tested that, and it just caught my attention enough to want to do and understand tall buildings more. The other thing about tall buildings, as more and more of us live in them, they can be a little bit isolating. You just, only time you see people is in the elevator. And so we wanted to counteract that with a kind of a building that would be more like a landscape, but a landscape turned vertical. So these are drawings of the topography of the Aqua Tower. And what we did there was just design a topography that would have hills and valleys that would allow people to see around corners and between buildings by pushing out away from the facade with big terraces. So imagine this topography now sliced up into many different floors, and that's really how we achieved this idea. So the idea is really about the social aspect of tall buildings. How can we increase connectivity between neighbors, but also bringing some of that terrestrial into the vertical dimension. I put this image in here because, again, it's like there's a sense of rhythm and movement. Freezing the movement is somehow a formal quality that we're very interested in. And you can see that in this project, which is, again, about the balconies. It's called City Hyde Park. So this is located also in Chicago, in the Hyde Park neighborhood, where we created a whole southern facade full of these balcony stems, we call them. And they create a pattern, a rhythm, based on their slight variations in their position. On the right-hand side, you can see one balcony stem. By doing this, though, we are able to really get a thermal break in between the balconies and the interior, and that's something that in cold climates we're always, working on. And so that green stem takes all of the gravity loads down to the ground, and you can establish a thermal break in between. The other great thing about this is it's like a threshold on the building. And here's that rhythm again, and you can see the different positions. If you look at the bottom edge, which is the south edge of the plan, all different variety of ways that this threshold becomes a three-dimensional space. And so they're all very different, and it's almost like when you walk out there, it's being on your front porch. It's very Escher-esque, I think, when you see it. But it really brings a life, even if there's no one on it, it gives some vitality to this building type, which otherwise you might know is not exactly the most exciting building type in the world. So another one we worked on, is just like down the block, is called the Solstice on the park. And here we advanced the idea of solar protection through the facade, the south-facing facade of this building. So you can see how the glass is angled down on the south facade, and that actually creates self-shading in this way. So in the summer, when the sun is high, the building is shaded by itself. In the winter, you want the sun to come in, and it's low, and it enters right in. We also had the brief to include about 30% of the balconies. So the way that we did that was just provide a balcony every third floor and alternate them to give another kind of life and vitality. And inside, you can see this is probably time of year, maybe fall, but you're getting this deeper and deeper penetration of light into the common areas. And then the Vista Tower, which is under construction right now in Chicago, and really it's supposed to be the third tallest building in Chicago when it's completed. But I'm not really that excited about that. I'm more excited about the ground of it, where it meets this multi-level roadway of Wacker Drive. We've done something that I don't think has been done before, which is to lift the building in the center. So we have the cores on the outside, and they form almost like a bridge, the two cores, and the center stem there it does not have any core down the middle, and it has very light column loads, only the gravity loads. So we have public access on grade, and which is down at the river, and up on the Upper Wacker Plaza, to allow passage through there. And you can see this is one of the most complicated sites because you have double roadways, you have parking, and what we were able to do there is really allow this passage and public access right through the middle of the building. It's created by a lot of the tall buildings that I've been working on. We've come up with ideas to bring a human scale to the building, and I mean, that's probably overused, but what I mean by it is that each element is considered on its own and the inside out, and then they're added up or aggregated to create the design. So here we're using this shape called a frustum shape, which is like a kind of, it's like a popcorn box, one upside down and one right side up to create one. A frustum is a truncated pyramid. And so we found that these could be nested together and provide more corners for the building. So now people will have multiple directions of light coming in, and that we can use the tops for green space. Of course, like this diagram shows, you can actually go through the middle of the building. This is where it is right now. One of the innovative things here is the glazing, which it's called on-demand, coatings on demand. I think people think about glass, they think that it's about transparency. And maybe in the 50s, the glass was really transparent, but now we know that we need more performance out of our glass. We need to reduce the dangers to birds, which is significant, like 1 billion birds a year die crashing into window glass. It's actually a combination of materials now. It's not only glass, but it's glass and metal. And so this glass, we're the first use of this on-demand coatings where you can get the performance that you want, the color that you want, and really get the sample right away, and so you can decide what to do. So there it is, and you can see aqua kind of in the background, and then the new Vista Tower, which is on the Chicago River. Coming back down to the ground. This project really brings together people into relationships with each other and their environment. We were asked to design a pavilion, that's it. from the Lincoln Park Zoo. They had borrowed or leased a land from the city on a 50-year lease to create this, to kind of improve the area. And they wanted to put a pavilion here for students that they could have classes outside under a covered area. This is the park. It's about 48 acres, this project, and it's right in the middle of the Lincoln Park Zoo. So and it's right in the city. So you can see the lush landscape that has come up as we've seen over the years, and the different activities that are taking place there. So when we got this project for the pavilion, we said, it's not just about a pavilion, it's about a place, and brought together landscape architects, ecologists, hydrological engineers, and we redesigned this pond to be a stormwater retention pond, a habitat, and a place. It has become a place to study urban wildlife. So in this picture on the left is a microphone, and they're recording bats. On the right, you can see test stations and the kids learning too. And so this whole new field has developed about urban wildlife, which now our rooftop is part of it as we work together with our former clients to study how wildlife is surviving in the city. As our cities grow and expand outward, it's actually really taking up habitat around the edges of the cities. And so, like, even if you see green, it could be, crops and agriculture or monoculture, lawns, and all of that is like a desert for animals and bees and insects and birds. And so I'm seeing a vision of like the future city that is actually much more biodiverse than the areas around it. Here we are seeing many more species entering into this. So on the left is the sightings of turtles that can now winter over in this pond because it's 20 feet deep instead of 3 feet deep. And on the right is eBird, which is from the Cornell Ornithology Lab, a program where citizens can log their sightings of different species. And so all of this is being measured now by people, by citizens. So they had at the Lincoln Park Zoo something like 40 pair of nesting night herons, and now it's 400 pair. We really see this being attractive. And then you have mammals in the city, skunks, great, and coyotes. But in a way, I'm so interested to see how we all can interact. As I said with Latour's talk, it's not just about humans now, it's about how all of us can interact in a network of living things on the planet. These fiberglass shells keep the rain out but let light in. And so this pavilion, instead of just being only an education pavilion, it really has become a flexible place where people can do a lot of different things, including dance, performances, yoga. All of our projects end up being used for yoga for some reason. But also, is it true that architecture can build relationships? Well, everyone wants to be in this place to do, like, get married, get their honeymoon pictures, get their wedding pictures, make out. This is a place where I never imagined it would be used like this, but this is called Danae Blanc, and it's like this thing where you get last-minute invitation to go to a certain place and have a picnic, and everybody wears white outfits. And it took the whole boardwalk, which was an incredible scene. And so people are drawn to this place with wildlife, and it's so exciting to me. We also are trying to generate more excitement with exhibitions. So one possible thing you might have seen was the Hive exhibition at the National Building Museum, and other things like that too that are more ephemeral architecture that just brings people together. We are trying to work on smaller projects where we can really experiment with materials. This is the Arcus Center for Social Justice Leadership, where we used a very old vernacular building technique on the walls. And this is a place where all of the architecture is pretty much this kind of neo-colonial style. And for a social justice center, we thought that it would probably be not that great to do a neo-colonial style. But what is architecture for social justice? We studied how people gather, but also how they plan. How do you plan to connect with people? And we didn't really, there was no precedent for social justice center, so we looked at these different examples of community meeting halls. And all of them really face inward toward like bringing people face to face, around water, around light. The one on the upper left has a very low roof, so no one can, get up and leave and get mad. It says stay sitting down, looking at each other. So those kind of things informed the center where the clients really wanted to break down barriers and make a warm and welcoming place. So a hearth and a place for food. So it can be for people, a few people gathering around the fire, or seminars, big conferences, study spaces, classes, and an auditorium that really faces out to this grove. If you look close at this glass, it also has frit on it because being very close to the environment, it is a potential place for avian bird strikes on the glass. And we've had none on that window. It faces out to these three different contexts, and then using a material that actually sequesters carbon instead of producing it, that is trees. These are white cedar that are found from the region, very resistant to rot and insects. And we really just stumbled upon them being used this way in an old barn in Michigan. So the big challenge with this project is how do you, bring back this technology? We found an older couple that was building some saunas with this technique, and we invited them to teach us how to do it, and our masons, our contractors. And I love it because it's just like absorbing the carbon as the tree grows. But then you don't do anything to this wood, you just let it dry. So it's not making any more carbon. And then it can be laid up like just a traditional brick wall, and that's what we have. And just the kind of a community, almost like a barn raising feeling to it, with a beautiful texture that weathers and is very stable. The barn I showed you was over 100 years old. And so this is some experiment that we made with this kind of eyebrow window on the side, which is just a lovely window into the conference room. Yeah. And then finally, just this, two more things. This one is how to build a community space out of a theater, because this is Glencoe, Illinois. It's a suburb north of Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, which is it was pretty much a car-oriented village without any restaurants or, it just kind of not a lot going on. And the theater company that located there wanted to be more of a civic space where people could have conversations after their performances. And some of the performances are really challenging too. And how can that start a dialogue? So in this project, we really researched theaters without buildings, like in the 13th century, and theaters in the round, outdoor theaters, to inspire a kind of new kind of space. This is a courtyard space. They were called inn yards. That was in Shakespeare's time. And ironically, in Shakespeare's time as well, the Tudor style proliferated. And the reason why the Tudor style proliferated was because it was a time of great deforestation, and so those logs are the trees being used in the buildings. So we wanted to capture some kind of space. Shakespeare is, clearly like the first modern theater. And what we did was create a space kind of like that, but in the lobby of the building. So, this could be a place for informal gatherings, impromptu things, but also after show talks. People can come there during the week when the rest of the theater is closed, and it really has become a civic space. The cool thing about the structure here, this walkway that surrounds the theater, it's all wood, and it's hanging the walkway in tension. That's not allowed by building code, so we had to really prove it, test it. This is pulling the wood tendons apart on this rig to show that they could indeed hold this walkway. And look how thin they are. It's amazing. That's the whole team up on top. This is the detail of the connection. Like when you, I won't go into the detail, but this is a connection without steel in it, and it's a beautiful connection we call it the cat's paw. So it's holding there the walkway. And you can see this outdoor space that's almost like a canopy walk in the park around the building. And the interior space, that's just a lobby, but it is also the connection between the second floor and the first floor, has an outdoor terrace, and these big doors that can open up to the park. And there it is. And lastly, I just wanted to show one project where we're thinking about these relationships and this territory on a more urban scale. We were asked by the city of Memphis to look at their riverfront. And the Mississippi River, it's huge and it meanders a lot. And it's always been a backside to Memphis, so similar to Chicago, like an industrial waterway. And so in our urban team, which we started about maybe 6 or 7 years ago to connect our architecture projects to a more urban scale, we were asked to look at all of the green spaces up and down the Mississippi River in Memphis and try to link them together and link them back into the city. Some interesting things happened when we were working on this and just beginning. Well, here you can see Front Street, which is not anywhere near the river, and you can see how the riverside in history was used as a loading zone, the Cobblestone Landing. And as we started to examine the Cobblestone Landing, which is about the length of 6 football fields long, it's huge, we realized that people had different reactions to it. And right when we were kind of discovering Cobblestone Landing, it was the summer when these 2 Civil War monuments were being taken down, or a movement started to take them down. They weren't actually put up after the Civil War. They're like from 1960 something. And they're like rather not very savory characters. And so we started asking people about the Cobblestone Landing, and there was also some tension about it. It's made of all these gigantic, really big boulders, like not cobblestones like in Boston, but big cobblestone. But it was also used as a place during the cotton trade, so therefore it was, a place where enslaved people were working on this landing. It was not built that way, but it was used for that purpose. So there's this kind of like difficult history. So this project really turned into, what do you do with a place like this? And it had this interesting different stones in it. I think most of the stones came from the north and were brought down along the Mississippi. And there were 9 different types of geological stones within the space. And then we, really got into the history. It was not only used for the cotton industry, but also Besides that, it was a place for World War I veterans, the caskets coming back. At one point, it was a parking lot. So it had all these different mixed uses over the years. And so when this movement started, Take 'em Down, we thought maybe it's an opportunity to think about what a new memorial or marker could be in a city. Not maybe a guy on a horse, maybe it's something different. Maybe it's more, it's a horizontal space that could potentially be very like a democratic space. And could it be the site of a new type of memorial? So what we did for this project as at the beginning, the research, was to identify different civic leaders. And this was Tammy. She was the one that really started the whole Take 'em Down movement. She was very brave, and we interviewed her, and we sketched these interviews. So we interviewed like 9 different civic leaders, all diverse backgrounds, and the mayor and some various people that were really cared about Memphis and got their stories. And so these were the 9, so one person for each of the different geologies. And then we found amazing people like Nicholas Nickelberry, Elmore Nickelberry. He was like 93 years old or something and still working in the sanitation department, and he actually had marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in the I Am a Man March. So he's still working, and artists and chefs and various and young people that really cared about Memphis. And each one we wrote down what they said, we sketched them, and then we asked if we could have some of the stones from the landing, and we tried to imbue their stories into the stones using different methods like, just hand grinding, sculpting. We used some different techniques with robotics to mill some of the stones, or layering. They were all, these different things were coming out of what the stories said. And then at the end, we had these 9 different stones that represented these stories of everyone. And so our goal is that we ended up shipping this to Venice, of all places, to show and tell the stories in Venice. In a way, it's like trying to give a new history to the stones, to get beyond the old histories. And I think that's a really, it's a clue as to what is a memorial now, I think. And this story is not finished. We showed them in Venice. This is the space of the Venice Biennale, where we showed the river. We installed with masons the actual stones, tried putting them in stripes, and then we had the stories there. And so it was just a way of giving this place a new history. And then upon their return, we did a show with them in Chicago, and now they're back in Memphis. So the idea is to continue to collect stories and to get ideas, not from us top down, but really coming from the community itself. Oh, that was the end. But I think let me just wrap it all up with a bow. The idea of not giving up on our planet just yet. We don't even know everything about all of the living things on this planet. We certainly know a lot more about space than we do about what's in the ocean. And so I think the task for us as architects is to continue to engage with people and connect people to each other, first of all, to get over the polarization, and connect all of us back to terra firma. Thank you very much. I can take questions too. I think there's enough time to do some questions as well. And if you want to just come on up to the microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
I really want to say that I appreciate your outlook on sustainability and incorporating, natural forms into your design and organic forms, and really appreciating like wildlife and nature as it exists, and actually approaching climate change and things that are currently happening to the landscape. But I have a question about whether in your firm you kind of reconcile the idea of landscape architecture in architecture and urbanism, and sort of like if you plan on expanding Studio Gang to include landscape architecture, because I think there's the line between, the definitions of everything does conform, it comes into the same space, and you really, a lot of your projects work along all three of those.
Yes, no, that's a great question, because when we started our urbanism practice, the reason why we did it is because we thought that it's almost like urbanism needs architecture to spark it, to start it, because it's a lot easier for people to get behind an architecture project than a plan that might take years to complete. So we saw them as complementary. Of course, landscape then comes into play, and so far we've been working with really great landscape architects. I work a lot with Scape, Reed Hildebrand, and others, but I think so, and I appreciate the let's say the professional autonomy of the landscape architect. But I think it would be good for us to even have some landscape within our firm so we can even better understand. So that's really, a way to work well with others that are not in your field, is to kind of have someone on the inside of your organization that can act as the translator, and to recognize what the strong ideas are. So I don't have any plans of competing with my landscape brilliant collaborators, but I do plan to. I think we do a pretty good job now of kind of understanding what they're saying and incorporating, and I think that could probably grow. So thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody else?
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at O'Hare?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Talk about Terrestrial.
It's kind of a small project.
Yes, okay.
You ever been to O'Hare?
Yes.
All of you?
I can give you, so it's a project about flight, right? And we're talking about the terrestrial. But in fact, I'm convinced that like in the 1950s and 60s, there was a glorification of flight in the airports. But today, it's more important how it feels on the ground, right? We already know that once you're up in the air, it's terrible. So you just want to get back down and, charge your phone and everything. So eat something. So this concept of the ground really was infused into our competition scheme. And I'm really, all I can say is, well, you could see the competition thing, but what's really behind driving that is to make a place that feels like Chicago, first of all. So when you arrive, you're in a place and not a generic place. And to do that, I think what we'll end up doing is really including manufacturing that happens locally, and even material reuse from local. So that will make it look pretty different, I think, than what we are used to seeing in the new airports. But at the same time, what's really cool about it is it will be the first airport in the States where you can transfer directly in the same terminal between an international flight and a domestic flight. So you don't have to go on a train far away. So that's a really interesting new challenge and complexity in terms of how you keep the separation of the passengers. And finally, I think I really am interested in the aspect of the when you come out and you finally have your bags and you're there in the city. Currently in our airport, it's like you're in the basement, it feels like. So this will be a more space and light dedicated to the meter and greeter hall, because that is the place where you're interfacing. It's about people meeting, meeting you to take you or meeting your family, and have some, my dream is to have a grocery store there. But, but some other things where you can actually, like in some European airports, we can actually have a social conversation in a place like that and not just squeeze everyone out. So we're still, really in the early stages, and they're, it's going to take a while. It's a very exciting project. I am really thrilled about that, and hopefully we can bring our sensibility and understanding of Chicago and the airlines there to make a really great project.
Are you, okay, sorry. Hi. I was just curious why and how you chose the idea of using a cat's paw tendon in the theater town center.
Okay.
It's just a very fascinating thing to me because I thought you'd want to use metal to support something so heavy, but.
Okay, good question. Have you ever, when you pick up a sledgehammer? I mean, if you ever have, but I mean, if you ever look at a sledgehammer, the way that the handle is put inside the head of the sledgehammer, you can see that the wood is expanded in there. And it's the same concept. So there's no metal going into between the sledgehammer head and the wood handle. The way that it holds in there is friction through the expansion of the wood. So just next time you see one, look and you'll see that so that's the same idea. So by taking these skinny battens of wood and adding material in between the cat's paw, it then becomes thick enough to hold the beams at the bottom. So it's a way, it's not like a brand new way of doing it, but it's a way that I've always liked to use the material for the qualities, what it actually can do. And so the wood is very capable of doing it without any metal. So and you can see it and it looks interesting. So that's.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. I was curious, you mentioned that with the Mississippi Riverfront Memorial, we're going to continue to collect stories. Does that mean there's going to be more stones forthcoming with that project?
Yes, I think that's where we're going with it. Is that the question? Or yeah, okay, all right. I didn't want to cut you off. No, we're working in Memphis. There's some restoration going on on the landing right now, and we've been working on another part of the waterfront called Tom Lee Park, and then our plan is to next kind of do a show there to talk about these stories and collect more stories and try to also get ideas from the public of what should go on that landing, because it's one of these things where I think there's a lot of knowledge already in the community, in the city, about what people want, and so we need to go through the process of pulling that out to determine. Like, one of the things people have said is the landing is very hot all the time and no one wants to go there because there's no shade, and so maybe is it possible to bring shade to it through trees or plantings or other things too that people have concerns about, like accessibility and So I think it's, urban design I've learned is much more about engaging people. I mean, architecture is too, but urban design is especially important to really find out. There's always local knowledge, and it's more successful if you kind of go with engage people and find out what they think already. I don't think it reduces the design at all. I think you still have to bring the creativity to it, but start with what's there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and please thank Jeannie again. And if you'd like to come up to the stage and ask questions, we have one more question. Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. You've spoken so beautifully about the way architecture makes the conditions for people, for plants, for birds. But you haven't talked about sound. And I'm curious how that factors into your design.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good, it's a huge topic. And I think each program has a different kind of sound signature, let's say. Let me just tell you, in case anyone is going to be in Paris in the next like 6 or 9 months, we designed an exhibition about cetaceans. A lot of these projects have nothing to do, let's say, with architecture, but we designed an exhibition, so it is design, and we worked with researchers from the Sorbonne who are studying how the communication between cetaceans and groups, how cetaceans use sound to create social groups, humpback whales, sperm whales, dolphins, and so one of the amazing things about it is that they now know that there's these special songs and even language that is specific to different groups in different parts of the world. So it's a really fascinating thing. So sound and sound with the, I didn't end up really showing it, but in the project called Hyde, which was in the National Building Museum, the driving force for that was to make an acoustic environment where you could have community events, talks, performances, because it's in a vast, I don't know if you've ever been there, but you can stand like 5 feet away from someone and you cannot hear each other talking because just the volume of the space is so large. So that project was really about almost creating this equivalent to what it would be like in a forest, because it had all these cylindrical cardboard tubes to create a more comfortable and more communication between people. But it's such an interesting and vast topic. With theaters, obviously, it's about creating the ability for speech to carry into make an intimate space. In the Writers' Theater project that I showed, one of the things we did there was, because the theater director really liked to have this intimacy, we brought these seats in as close as possible so people even have their feet on the stage, and then pulled 2 of the seating gradons, the seating tribunes, off of the back wall, and so that actors can circulate around them, so they can even start, the dialogue or singing or something like that before they even enter into the stage. So that was very much driven by a certain kind of acoustic signature for that space. So I don't really have like a one way of dealing with it. I think I'm just usually trying to learn what's needed and then respond to it. But it's a very interesting question, because materials also, all materials have different qualities. Okay. All right, thank you very much.